There's nothing that they can point to in the macro statistics to say that Fauci did anything other than a horrifyingly, terribly bad, awful, no good job at treating COVID. Fauci on the hot seat still because, well, he contributed to helping to create the COVID virus. And of course, we are very close to common knowledge, which is when everybody knows that everybody knows something. And then you can just talk about it on a bus in a crowded movie theater line, and nobody will turn around and look at you like you're crazy because we already know this. What do we know? Let me show you what we're getting close to here. This is in the Telegraph, the UK Telegraph. Front page, got to scroll down a tiny bit. Look at this headline right here on the front page. COVID vaccines may have helped fuel rise in excess deaths. Now, the excess deaths are horrifying. It's like literally world wars are the only other context we have for young people dying at the rates they have in 2021, 2022. What's been mysterious is the complete lack of curiosity, of interest. Worse, the blocking of any inquiry, the shaming, the calling people conspiracy theorists, the saying you can't prove correlation is not causation, and on and on and on. Even as they're shouting down people who are trying to look into the excess deaths, of course, there was no official inquiry, no study, no looking into it by any of the main health bodies. And that's still true today. So this article by Sarah Napton looks at this article that just came out in the BMJ, the British Medical Journal, which is excess mortality across countries in the Western world since the COVID-19 pandemic, our world in data estimates of January 2020 to December 2022, which of course is in the context of 2020, of January before COVID came, through COVID, and then into the introduction of the vaccine, starting principally around January of 2021. So this is what they have in here. These are 4 people, researchers from the Netherlands. I won't take you through the whole thing. I just wanted to get all the way down here into the discussion. Here they're looking at excess mortality. Big ugly blobs here. Good study. You might want to look into it if you can. But, you know, down here in the discussion, what they're really saying is, look, we don't know what has caused this particular thing, but we should probably be looking into it. Heart deaths were the leading cause here, 6% above where they should have been, 47 separate countries that they looked into. And they said, gosh, you know, the actual mortality figure that people were facing if they were young and healthy in children was 0.0003%. It was like nothing. I mean, if you're rounding to the nearest thousandth of a digit, it's zero, no risk. And yet, to this day, these things are still on the vaccine schedule for 6 months and older in the United States. That is really evil. It is satanic. Something is very wrong with that. You would never expose somebody to any risk whatsoever if on the other side, they weren't facing any risk at all. This is an unprecedented moment, and that's just how completely insane everybody went. Now, what's also fascinating is to note here how this is played out in U.S. Congress as Fauci's getting grilled. You would think there would be some reasonable outrage against a gentleman who potentially, and I think absolutely did, contribute to this overall pandemic by creating the virus and then hiding where it came from simply because he's a self-interested, psychopathic narcissist who doesn't care about you or me. He'll cry crocodile tears when he's trying to show that he cares about his own family, but has he shed a single tear for all the people he killed in the AIDS crisis and here later in COVID, and who even knows what mischief he's been up to in the intervening years? But I'll guarantee you, with his track record, it has not been a good thing. So let's listen in on this. Kim.com, always a great follow on Twitter, here says the fall of Fauci, COVID-19 is officially exposed as a U.S. government project, a virus engineered by U.S. scientists using a biolab in China for cover. The biggest crime against humanity, killed more victims than the Nazi Holocaust against the Jews, demand justice. Let's listen in now to this question or comment by Congressman out of Texas.
I now recognize Dr. Jackson from Texas for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Fauci, I have to say, I, as so many Americans, am deeply disappointed in your actions during a critical time in our nation's history while you were in key leadership roles as the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease and as the chief medical advisor to President Biden. Put quite simply, you failed miserably, in my opinion. Based on all we have learned during the pandemic and all that we have since learned through this committee's work, I believe your failures stem from both an effort of self-preservation, manifested by a series of lies and cover-up, and by a total failure of leadership. It was obvious to everyone that you and your organization, NIH, had a lot to lose if the American people were to discover that COVID-19 was most likely leaked from a lab in Wuhan, China, and that you, via EcoHealth Alliance and Peter Daszak, actually funded this research, and that this lab was actively and recklessly conducting gain-of-function research. As such, you did everything in your power to deflect and cover up this possibility. You even recruited others to help you in this effort. Unfortunately, this cost our country and the world valuable time that may have led to answers regarding the origin, may have blunted the spread, and would have almost certainly saved lives. While I think most of us have known...
Hold on now. Let's carry on. So a couple of things, very important points here. Not only did they have a lot to lose if it was exposed what their role in this whole thing was, but they also wouldn't have stood to gain. We have now found out that over $700 million of royalties have been flowing to NIH scientists, and a big chunk of that, we think, $400 million, might have come from Moderna. Now, you know what would have happened if Moderna and Pfizer hadn't been able to push their jab out there? Then they wouldn't have made all that money. That's part one. I don't know who or why people were so interested in the government to get those jabs in so many arms, but they were. They were maniacal about it. They did everything in their considerable power. They had late night show skits. They had used nudge units. They had the latest in psychological warfare. They had cognitive warfare units. They were using all of the manipulative tools of state to coerce people and nudge people and psychologically manipulate people into getting these particular jabs. Now, why? I don't know. But I do know that Fauci, being probably just the face of the fall guy face for this whole thing, I don't think he drove the whole thing. But hey, guess what? He was a very happy, willing participant in this whole charade. What he did is really unconscionable. But even with all of these hard questions about what he did, I'm still disappointed that I'm not seeing the one thing that I would be hammering on him for, besides the whole lab origin and all of his CYA and cover-up activities and FOIA dodging actions and all of this other stuff, which is this. Let's consider here for the moment. Let's go here to this. This is the United States of America's COVID statistics. Now, listen, they may be wrong. We may have overcounted. There may be far too many people counted as a COVID death when they were motorcycle accident victims, or they were going to die anyway, but happened to have a positive PCR test with a cycle threshold of 40 plus, or who knows. So even with that, though, but let's mentally chop these numbers in half, if you will. Look at this 1.135 reported million COVID deaths here. And you can see here that there was this big uptick here, but look where it's upticking. Let's come down here a little bit. So here they are peaking around early 2021. And here's another big giant peak here in late, let's call that fall of 2021. And here's a third giant peak, almost as big as the first peak, out here in 2022. What are these? This is really weird. Look at, and by the way, look at the scale on this. These are deaths per day, daily deaths, right? 2,000, 2,500, 3,500 practically, even here, way out in 2022, 2,500 deaths per day out of 330 million people. Now, what if we compare that? So this is Fauci's record right there. There it is. That's his record, plus all of his goons at the NIH, who still to this day in their NIH treatment guidelines for COVID say there's not enough evidence to recommend for or against vitamin D, even though from a risk potential reward benefit, it's a no-brainer. Vitamin D is the biggest no-brainer on the table, and we still won't talk about it. Why? Good guess is because vitamin D, if people were adequately supplied with vitamin D in their daily lives, so many pharmaceutical products, from nasal spray to allergy medicines to sleep aids to you name it, would probably experience a steep decline in sales, because vitamin D is really critical in keeping you not chronically sick, which is, of course, how pharma companies make all their money. So, but look at this. Look at these daily deaths, measuring in the thousands for 330 million people. Now, I'm going to show you some statistics from a subgroup area, from a region, a state in India, which has 260 million people. So not quite 330 million. So let's say 260, that's like 26 to 33. So it's basically got maybe, 20, 25% fewer people in it. So mentally adjust these numbers up by 20, 25%. Let's go to Uttar Pradesh now and see how they did over the same time frame, facing the same strains of COVID. Only difference is in Uttar Pradesh, they used ivermectin. They sent out these little kits I showed them at the time, or these little blister packs, which had vitamin D, which had ivermectin in it, and which had zinc in it, and which had some azithromycin usually. And so they sent out these kits. Well, how did they do sending their little kits out that, of course, Fauci fought tooth and nail? Why? Because if those kits came out and there wasn't effective treatment for COVID that was effective, well, then the EUA doesn't work for the jabs, and then he and his scientists don't get these multi-million-dollar paydays. So sometimes it's as simple as that. Let's go to Uttar Pradesh. Oh, total reported deaths, 23,643. Well, let's imagine they do a bad job recording stuff, and so let's double their numbers. Let's take that all the way up to 46,000, okay? Look at this. Look at their chart. They had one run at it here with the Delta strain, I believe that would be, right there in 2021, and then they had nothing. Like their daily deaths, their second bump, if you can call it that, was daily deaths of 18, 20. What? I mean, this is nothing. So this is 260 million people, and they flatlined it. It's these charts that everybody should be saying. Oh, you know, Democrats like, oh, Fauci, the nation owes you a debt of gratitude and for being brave and standing firm and saving lives. No, these are thousands of deaths per day under his watch compared to Uttar Pradesh. And by the way, this would have been a great time right here, somewhere around July, would have been a great time to pick up the phone in his role and go, hey, Uttar Pradesh, yeah, Fauci here. Yeah, what are you guys doing? Oh, I see. Contact tracing, ivermectin. Yeah, no, we can't do that, right? Billions and trillions were arrayed against creating this particular outcome. That is the great tragedy. That's the scorecard by which every public health official in the CDC, the FDA, and especially Fauci and the NIH and the NIAID, because the I in NIAID is infectious, right? This would be an infectious disease, kind of in their wheelhouse. So this is what they should have been focusing on. Fauci, how does anybody say, Fauci, we're so grateful for your service. Man, you got us through a really tough time. No, this is the worst. This is literally one of the worst scorecards in the entire world. You have to go to the UK to get even worse than this, but even it's kind of a tie. It's hard to do this bad. Like, let me repeat, you can't do this badly unless you're trying to do this badly. This is the system that we came up through. This is it. Like, this is Fauci's scorecard. Thousands of deaths per day. There it is. And by the way, anybody have an explanation for why we're experiencing these massive waves of death at a time when mass vaccinations were also coming out? Doesn't that kind of prove that vaccinations don't work? Shouldn't we look to Uttar Pradesh and say, also human beings, also facing COVID, only many of these people aren't quite as wealthy or as well off, so maybe they have some nutritional deficiencies or sanitation, I don't know, but still kicking the pants off of the United States. This needs to be gone over and over again. That's a good-looking chart. Great response. What did you do? We should learn from that. This is a horrifying chart. This is a failure. Whoever is responsible for this chart, and every single one of them, including your doctor, by the way, I'm sorry to say, but if your doctor was not telling you about ivermectin and vitamin D and having a well-prepared terrain like we talked about on my channel and many other people did all through early 2020 and beyond, if they didn't talk to you about that, the importance of sunlight, the importance of low stress, good sleep, eating well, vitamin D, C, quercetin, elderberry, zinc, you name it, right? There's so many things you can do for your health, which I am thankful that COVID came along, because actually I know more about my own health now than I did before. So positive benefit. But this is a horrifying, this is like the worst thing. Fauci, some Democrat, like, so you're proud of this, huh? As a Democrat, you're proud of this. That's why you say Fauci needs to be commended for his service. He needs to be thanked. You want to put up a statue to him somewhere because he contributed directly. He was in a position directly to make this not such a horrifyingly bad chart. Why are we not holding him to this standard? What did you do, big guy? Also Rochelle Walensky, also Deborah Birx, everybody who was involved in this entire fiasco of COVID. This is a terrifyingly bad report card. This is a good report card. This is a really bad one. This is a good one. ours did not look like this. End of story. So that's the story we've got today. Keep pushing. Common knowledge, really important. When everybody knows that everybody knows, maybe we can finally develop the righteous anger and indignation necessary to put these crimes and criminals and clowns in jail. This is horrifyingly bad. Like, this is really bad. I mean, not quite as bad as NORAD did on 9/11, but I mean, pretty bad, right? That was a singular failure of the most magnificent proportion. Of course, all those people also got promoted. So just saying. Not saying we have the best system, maybe a few tweaks and we can put down the dials to get this a little bit better. But at any rate, please don't be fooled. There is nothing that they can point to in the macro statistics to say that Fauci did anything other than a horrifyingly, terribly bad, awful, no good job at treating COVID. So with that, I'm going to now take this over to Peak Prosperity. I got a lot more to talk about today. We got stuff going on, well, all over the world. As you know, I do daily scouting reports. It's just like this. If you want to save time, you want to have somebody who's obsessive about this, find it, digest it, and present it to you so that you don't have to scour the troubling news all day long like this guy. Please consider becoming a subscriber at Peak Prosperity. We would love to have you there. We are a very welcoming tribe of people, but it's not for everybody. We bring facts. We bring data. We're got high emotional quotient. Intelligence is over there. We don't yell, we don't scream, we don't denigrate. It's very civil discussion, which I know isn't everybody's cup of tea. So with that, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.